Hi, my name is Annabell. I'm an architectural designer, and today this isn't for my job, but as a hobby, I like to make furniture for myself and possibly for friends. Today I'm making a bookshelf for my apartment. Another reason that I make stuff instead of just buying them, I grew up in a household where So I'm about to explain while sketching all the iterations of the design I've been through thus far and the reasoning behind moving from point A to B to C. So you'll understand more once the drawing starts. At first I was thinking at 2,250 millimeters or 2.25 meters width. And I was thinking like a desk with like a sort of cabinet set up on either side. But then and then I wanted to go through like how would the parts go together kind of thing. So just thinking while drawing, that's what sketching is about. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's just to help you understand three-dimensionally what you're about to make without the expense of actually making a mock-up like this just yet. Then when I started to call around more about material, at first I thought I could get a big enough board to fit in, 2.25 meters and cut it out of one board, but the cost is just so high that the next best thing would have been to make a slightly less wide desk at 1.8 meters, and then that can fit into a more affordable board for me. And this is me working that out here. So basically I'm going to try and fit it into the 90 by 18, 90 centimeters by 18 or 0.9 meters by 1.8 meters, rather than this bigger one, which is 1.2 meters by 2.4 meters, or in Japanese, or they call it 3 by 6 because the proportion is 3 by 6, or sanrokubangs. So basically, you can't tell from the drawings, but this was a bigger desk, and now it has to be smaller because of cost constraints when it comes to the cost of a board this size versus a board this size. So if I can fit the desk, what would be the top of the desk, into one of these boards, and this board is cheaper, that's better. So these kind of things come up in a design process where at first you have something in mind, but then when you have real world constraints, like you call around to all the different hardware stores and what they have, you're not willing to spend that, then you have to go back and redraw or even change the shape of the pieces so that they can all fit into one board that is smaller, and it'll cost you less. So that was the first change from step A to step B is, okay, resizing parts. And then another realistic constraint I have is that with COVID, working from home, we're not allowed to store things at my company anymore. So I have to store a lot more of my physical books at home. Like you might say, why not just use Kindle, or why not just use Amazon books? But this is more like catalogs from makers that we work with, like material catalogs, samples of glass or sheet metal or something. So I can't really store those at work anymore. So I need more shelf space than what I was originally planning, which is like a desk with two sort of cabinets on the side and then leg room in between. Realistically, I'm gonna be accumulating a lot more books over the years, and who knows when this work from home situation will be over, or if it will ever be over. So then I thought, okay, my first priority actually needs to be more storage. And I don't really like the idea of stacking to the ceiling just yet, but I'm also going to design it in a way that I can grow the pieces. So what we're looking at here is basically, so I just came from the workshop this morning, and I made a sample of how these joints are going to work. So I forgot the hammer, so I can't really get it apart that easily. But basically this joint, it's no nails, no screws. You just cut out slots, and so this ply is 15 millimeters. That's they say 15 millimeters for retail, but the more you work with plywood, you understand that wood is almost like it's still alive. So on a rainy day it swells, on a dry day it contracts. So when you make joints like this, you have to make consideration for the expansion and contraction of the wood. So I'm not just going to take for granted that this slot needs to be 15 millimeters because they tell me they've sold me a piece of 15 millimeter wood. So that's why if you're working with wood, it's really good to have a caliper. Basically, the caliper will tell you that this is actually 15.5. So where this 0 hits, this is the 10 mark, in between the 10 and 20 you see 15, and then that 0 is just past the 15 mark, so it's a bit swollen actually. It's thicker than 15. So I actually made the slot, you're probably going to see the imperfections, but it's just a test cut. I made the slot 17 millimeters, about that, to give 1 millimeter tolerance on each side for this piece. And the slot I made is just under 17, if you can read it there. 16.8 maybe. I'll wrap up everything in the end, you know, what constraints you need to consider for what design you want, but a big constraint that every designer, or in architecture, the same principle carries over. You need to understand your materials. If you're working with wood, you need to understand the behavior of wood. If you're working with steel, you need to understand the behavior of steel. Glass, concrete, bamboo, bricks, stone, whatever it is. So it's just a piece of furniture, but the process of design and certain principles, they carry over no matter what you're designing, especially if it's a three-dimensional object that has a function and has to carry load. This has to carry the load of books. So I moved from this iteration because I modeled it on the computer and I don't know, it was fine, but I just thought it could be aesthetically a bit more interesting and even structurally a bit more interesting. So I started playing around with, I ran the idea by my boyfriend, and we started playing around with the idea of the golden ratio or Fibonacci series. And you're going to look at this and think, this isn't the golden ratio or the Fibonacci series because it's supposed to be 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. But with the space, considering what I said before, with the size of the board that I now have to use because I want to cut cost, the whole 1, 1, 2, 3, 5 progression does not work very cleanly here. So I just kind of went back to a more simple rhythm that we also use in architecture, which is just a kind of 1, 2, 1, 2 pattern. You decide, you know, a width. This is width 1, this is width 2, and then I just repeat that. And a big inspiration for that is also from the project we did in Nepal. The whole slotting thing, the X shape gives more rigidity and integrity to each piece of ply, the way they distribute weight on each other. And another reason I try to avoid nails and screws at all costs with my furniture design is that generally you cannot drill into the side of the ply. With this core lumber ply, it's fine, but I'll show you later other types of ply where it's just repeated layers of thin veneer, where if you drill into them, it splits. I tried to draw a little illustration here, but it will send a crack and compromise the integrity of the ply. So ply tends to only be able to take weight. This is my little attempt at a dumbbell or something, I don't know. Kettlebell. It tends to only take weight well this way and doesn't take weight well this way, because this is where, you know, it splits apart. This is another important thing when it comes to knowing your materials.
ショップボットでやるならこのフィレットをつけたくないっていう。
フィレットは構わないけど、一応自分のスキルもちょっと上げたいんで、なんか手切りでもやってる。
そうね、ナンバーコア 0.15 and 0.15 for both sides.
Okay.
For the switch bar.
Okay. I mean, I know on a rainy day it's gonna swell just like other veneer, but because it cuts so clean, like it's almost kind of loose with like one on each side.
Mofu?
Oh, like.
Yeah,
so I just want to explain what these are. So the last time I made something, people were asking me like why these little round things have to be in it, and it's because like, okay, this one this morning you weren't with me, I was working by myself, but I cut this with a jigsaw and then I chipped it out with a chisel. If I sand, I can get something close to a clean edge. I'm just making a test cut with 2 different sizes for the opening. 7.5. Okay. And then the sound comes.
Yep.
Yes. Here, yes. Reset.
Yep.
懐かしい。懐かしい。Turning on the vacuum that picks up all the sawdust. Too much. We just did these 2 sample cuts and we learned that they're both too tight. So I'm using 15mm thickness plywood, and you can't cut these slots at exactly 15 or it won't fit. Like, you have to leave a bit of a gap on either side where they can slide in, but you don't want it to be too big a gap that it makes the furniture look like it's not well made. So we normally have to do these tests depending on the type of wood, and sometimes some days the machine, I remember this from school, the machine, even if it's the same machine, 2 different days it would cut differently. So yeah, so you always do a test cut before the final one. So at least today we learned that with the machine we need a wider gap. We tried the 0.1 and the 0.15 and neither of them would close. Like, it's stuck here, it won't close all the way. So here it's called Cove Lab, and it's the lab that I graduated from at KO Architecture, and our campus is down in a different prefecture, Kanagawa, but this is like more central for most people who live in Tokyo. So the lab made a satellite lab in Tokyo. Yeah, and we studied a lot of like digital fabrication in school using Shopbot. This is my senpai from school, so he's a graduate too, and we both worked in architecture, and now, well, he's a pro furniture maker, but I'm just making some furniture for myself. So he runs the shop here as a OB, old boy of the lab, and I'm an OG, old girl, so I get to use it. I just want to tell the world, like, stop buying these expensive chairs. The chair is not going to solve your problem. It's your posture that's going to solve the problem.
So elevate my feet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, like even the traditional Japanese toilet is actually better than a Western toilet.
Better.
It's better for like the human body. Okay, so one of the labs at KU Architecture is the Kobayashi lab. And in the Kobayashi lab, one of the projects is that we use a lot of plywood. And we made, while I was in school, we made a lot of temporary earthquake resistant houses for disaster relief, completely out of plywood, so no steel reinforcement or anything. So we had a great engineer. All of us as students, we would design, the engineer would check if it's earthquake resistant, then we would build with local communities. And I spent 2 years of my life doing that. So I kind of have these skills now, I guess. And anytime I need something for myself and I can't find it, if I can't find it, I'll buy it in a store. But if I can't find exactly what I want, I'll make it. So that's what I'm doing today. I wanted a very specific bookshelf for my apartment. We already filmed before cutting out the parts and stuff, but now these are the shelves, and these would be the braces that slot into here. So there's 6 of these, 3 of the longer parts. So there's some more over there. These are already sanded. This one is already sanded. These 2 are sanded. So I only have to sand this one and this one. And oh yeah, I also have a stool here that I made. Alright, so one of the tenets, I guess, of our veneer house project is that as much as possible we try to use no nails and no screws and learn from traditional Japanese joinery to design the joints ourselves. So for this stool, I really just wanted like a slotting, very simple joint. So anyone can assemble it and anyone can take it apart. You don't need to be savvy at putting fancy IKEA furniture together or anything. The one thing that I will say you need is a mallet. One time I made one and I took it all the way home and I forgot the mallet, so I just sat on it until it sunk down. So that works too if you don't have one of these. But anyway, I'm gonna use this. Let me just put this down.
Okay.
It's a bit uneven. Alright. Okay. Here's our stool. And why I'm kind of obsessed with these little stools is another hobby of mine is modern dance. And I'm really kind of obsessed with good alignment and alleviating pain through the way we hold posture in our lives, not by trying to like get an expensive chair or anything. So for me, a lower seated position, it doesn't matter if it's a hard stool, the lower the stool is, the higher your knees rise, and that way it relieves the pressure off the lower back for me. So when I sit like this, my spine is completely elongated at the base and I can work like this for hours. So I actually use another stool just like this that I made at home at my work desk, and then my work desk is a bit higher, so I'm completely upright when I work. The average chair, well, these chairs are a bit low too, but the average chair is normally at about 400 millimeters high, and this one I made at 300. I see what's happening, and this is a good lesson here. Okay, so in previous stools that I've made, people ask me what's with these little round corners. You call them fillets. So the reason that you put in a fillet is because if the bit that cuts these parts out itself is round, so if you make a corner without indenting like this, the part can't fit. This also has mini fillets, right? Without the fillets, you see this is a straight edge, and if I bring the straight edge in, without the fillet, it stops wherever the curve is, right? So we have to calculate for allowing this right edge. Of course, it's not a perfect right edge right now. I just picked up a scrap piece. But allowing this right edge to go all the way into the corner, we have to dig out these fillets. And right now, I can tell that maybe I need to dig out these fillets more. So I probably have to keep sanding. And I've been sanding since morning. So more so than cutting out the parts, sometimes the sanding is what takes forever. Okay, it was Latin. I would not easily compare it to my day job designing actual buildings, but I think in all design processes there's this sort of trial and error and learning your materials, learning how they behave. Wood is very, let's say it's volatile. It swells on a humid or rainy day, contracts on a dry day. You may have calculated that, okay, I'm trying to fit 15mm plywood into this slot, so I'm gonna leave just 0.5 millimeter or less tolerance on either side. But then sometimes you just never know. On a super rainy week, it just keeps swelling and swelling, and then it might not fit anymore, and then you have to go sand it again, and then you over sand it for the sake of the rain. But then when it's sunny again and it dries and contracts, then the slot is too big. So you have to account for all these things. And making buildings, that I can say is a parallel. That's the same, just on a larger scale with a lot more moving parts than a piece of furniture. When we were making buildings, we used a lot less a ply that wasn't this delicate. We would use like a cedar ply or rawan wood, but this is shina in Japanese, or Japanese lime wood, so it's very soft. It's for furniture, so it's a lot more delicate, and I'm not completely used to it yet. Yes, we only have that long piece left and we are done, and then it's time to assemble. Finished. Finished sanding everything, so I'm going to take it outside and assemble everything. Another reason that I make stuff instead of just buying them, I grew up in a household where we just made everything. Like I'd spend my weekends woodworking with my father, and my two older brothers, they're like adults by the time me and my closest older sister were born. So my father didn't have any more boys, so he would just like force me and my sister to do everything with him, like woodwork. We would make benches, we would make fences, we even made this whole gazebo in the yard. So I don't know, I just got used to the idea that if you need something, you make it, you don't buy it. And actually moving to Japan, when I first had my first few apartments, I just never had anything in it. And people would be like, you just moved in? And I'm like, no, I just get anxiety about like taking money out of my wallet to buy something from someone else. I really don't like buying, especially big purchases like furniture. It just makes me uncomfortable. So there's that. And even other things too, like my mother is a pattern designer. So she designed, if you've ever seen like those paper cutouts that are shaped like, half of a dress, and you lay it on the fabric and then you cut out the fabric and sew the pieces together. She doesn't sew, but she designs the patterns. So she's very good at manipulating fabric and drafting the patterns that go into making clothes. So I grew up around her doing that too. And for our furniture, like any couch or chair we had. When it would get old, she wouldn't buy a new one. She would just literally make the covering for the furniture over, and it looks so professional. Like, you know, fabric for furniture is complicated because there's lots of curves and darting and stuff, and she could just do it. She could do anything. Or drapes, bed sheets, anything. My mother, she makes them professionally, so anything for her house, she would just make them. So I mean, I grew up with my mother drafting things and making, and then my father making wooden things too. So I don't know, it's just in me to make whatever I need. And I mean, now I'm saying this and I'm thinking about it, probably the combination of my mother and father is why I would end up in something like architecture, like the drafting, the making. Anyway, let's move everything outside. What's funny is, okay, I'm not gonna completely assemble it and push everything all the way to the back, because I've been hammering out here and it's really loud, and I don't want people to like call some sort of authority on me. In my field, like when we have sites, we're actually supposed to notify everyone in the area a month in advance before construction starts. So I'm just gonna stop here. I'm not gonna drive the shelf all the way to the back, but I think you get the idea. No nails, no screws, just slotting in everything. And for a few months I'd like to keep it like this without any varnish, because I just think this wood is so beautiful. That was about a 2-month journey from conceiving the idea to make. At first I wanted to make a desk, then it became a shelf. I'll probably add a desktop afterwards, so the journey isn't completely over, but let's wrap it up here. So about 2 months, sourcing materials, sourcing where I was gonna make the shelf, and you know, figuring out all those logistics as well as designing. Reflecting on it, it was really satisfying to conceive of something and then see it in real life within 2 months, compared to at work where I've been on the same projects since the last time we did a video. I think that was over 2 years ago. And I'm still designing those buildings, and we still have about 5 more years at least before we complete those buildings. So in regard to, you know, getting a bit impatient with how long buildings take, it's kind of nice to have an outlet designing furniture and shaping my own space. In the end, it's sharpening my own skills so I don't lose what I'm not using. I used to make a lot more stuff in university, but I don't really make anything that much anymore. Lately, I've been getting like all these requests from different friends to like make stuff for them. So I need to mix, I don't know. It's just a good way to keep the skill and momentum going. Anyway, thanks for sticking with us, or me, through that past 2-month journey. If you want to keep up with anything I'm doing in the future, you can check my Instagram, Annabell at Annabell or I'm kind of known for not being too consistent online because my work is very busy, but you can also email me at annabellom@gmail.com. Yeah, I'd like to keep the momentum going, making furniture this year. Gonna do a few commissioned pieces for some friends, and who knows, I can probably scale up in the next 2 to 3 years to mass producing more. Who knows? For now, I'm enjoying it. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.